You're listening to Kicking It with the Coves. Do you have a problem with it?
No, Sensei!
I mean, no, Dad.
No, Dad.
Hello, welcome back to Kicking It with the Coves. This is Martin Cove, a.k.a. John Kreese, and I'm here with my son, Jesse Cove, and with my daughter, Rachel Cove. And we have a really special guest for you today.
Yes, we do. We have Peter Vonosak. He is a huge Cobra Kai fan and a wonderful human being who's been on the ride with us since the beginning, the inception of Cobra Kai, and obviously Karate Kid. And he's actually a host of his own podcast that I'm sure you all listen to as well. It's called Cobra Kai Companion, so definitely give them a follow. You can check it out wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can follow Peter on Twitter at Cobra Kai Pod. That's Cobra Kai Pod, and on Instagram at Cobra Kai Companion with a C, Cobra Kai Companion. Peter, thank you so much. Sorry?
Companion with a K.
Companion with a K, sorry. It's Cobra Kai Companion with a K. My bad. Cobra Kai Companion with a K on Instagram. And, dude, Peter, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you here.
Well, I'm happy to be here, but the honor is all mine. I appreciate, being reached out and to be a guest on your guys' show. I'm a huge fan. Rachel and Jesse, I've spoken to both of you about some of these previous episodes. So yeah, really happy to be here, and I feel that in itself is an understatement.
What is the shirt you're wearing, by the way? I noticed you're wearing a very specific shirt.
Very specific. For the occasion, I am rocking the King Cobra T-shirt. One with the King Cobra himself.
Yes.
So,
I have a lot of those. Good. They're good shirts.
When I saw this go up for sale, I said I had to get one immediately, at least one. So I collect a few of them. I have a Jacob Bertrand shirt that he put out, and I believe the proceeds went to something. But yeah, I'm always here out supporting the people that give us this amazing show.
Why are you such a fan of this amazing show? What does this show mean to you?
Well, the show obviously is an extension of the Karate Kid. For those that don't really know my story, Mr. Miyagi was a really big character and very influential in my life. My two grandfathers lived out of the state, so I didn't grow up with any of them. And for a kid of the 80s and 90s, I feel a lot of our babysitters were movies. And the Karate Kid was just one of those that was on constant rotation. And the character was also never written to be a punchline or stereotypical like some of the other Asian characters in cinema. And I feel like, Hollywood is probably doing a better job with that now. But, a man that's short in stature, he was never afraid of anybody. He took on discrimination like head on. And so I admired that. And being somebody, Asian American, I felt I dealt with things, that Miyagi had dealt with. I spent 10 years in the Army. And I've dealt with discrimination against like brothers in the same uniform as me. Like, we're doing this during the month of May, which is, Asian American and Pacific Islander Month, Heritage Month. And I remember one time, we were talking about my ethnicity, and I mentioned the term like Asian American, and this other guy, he was just like, no, you're American. You're born in America, so you're just American. I go, so I don't have a culture. Like I'm just an American. So like I remember having a heated debate over that. And so like, I just kind of came across like all these obstacles growing up in life. And I always think back to how Mr. Miyagi handled things. He was very humble. He was never really, the type to strike first, so to speak. So just kind of looked up to him like a grandfather.
What do you believe of the strike first mentality?
And that's the thing, like having spent time in the military, like I kind of...
Thank you for your service, by the way. I did not know that about you, and I think I commend you. That's just a wonderful thing, so thank you.
Oh, absolutely. It's an honor to serve. And, when I see pictures of you guys going to visit the troops, that always warms my heart because, like, a lot of times people enlist for their own reasons. Like when I enlisted, it was literally right before 9/11. So when I enlisted, I wanted to get the GI Bill and further my education after school. But instead, 9/11 happens in the middle of basic training, and we're all kind of scared, 18-year-olds not knowing what's going to happen. But it wouldn't be for a few years until I get sent overseas to help out there too. But just kind of going back to that, I feel sometimes people forget about the soldiers, and their reasons for signing up. It's not necessarily to go fight. They have families they want to take care of. I was a teenage father. That was the other thing too. So I didn't feel like I had the time to really go to college. So at the very least, being taken care of by the military and in hopes of using that GI Bill, I thought that would help me out and my then, newborn son. So
How old is your son?
he he will be 22 this summer.
Is he a fan of the show as much as you?
He really is, and I have a 20-year-old daughter. They are huge fans of Cobra Kai. My daughter's a huge fan of Tanner Buchanan, and my son he grew up watching movies because I put on movies that I grew up watching, and he's enjoyed them all. So he was a fan of the Karate Kid, and to see it kind of be told in modern times now, he has become a big fan of the show as well. So when he saw my interviews at Paley Fest, he even texted me that, Dad, I'm so proud of you. Like, you've come a long way from just like recording in the garage closet.
Wow. Can you tell us that story? Like, when did you start doing the podcast? So you started doing it in your closet?
Yeah, we because I have kids, and so I needed somewhere really quiet, and we have a walk-in closet in the garage, and so I kind of turned that into a podcast booth, and I've been podcasting for almost 8 years now, and when it's funny because I had not known that Cobra Kai was even going to be a thing, and I believe it was about spring of 2017 on my other podcast, I decided to do a Karate Kid retrospective, doing all four movies. And I had a guest on my podcast at the time, Tom Cole. Wait, hold on, Tom Coe, not to be mistaken with Tom Cole from the show. And fast forward to a year later, we hear that there's going to be a Cobra Kai show, and so I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's cover the show. I'll watch the first season, and I'll just do like one big episode recapping it. And so the May 2nd, 2018 comes, and I'm working, and I'm like, okay, I can't wait to get off so I can watch these first two episodes that are free on YouTube Red. And so I get home, I start watching those first two, well, the first episode really, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. I couldn't wait to get to the second episode. After the second episode, I go, well, I have to keep going. So I started my free trial, and then I ended up binging the entire first season that very evening on May 2nd. And after watching that season, I go, there's no way I can just do one episode talking about Cobra Kai. And so I decided to do individual episodes, reviewing each episode at a time. And since I've had the experience of reaching out to actors and interviewing them, Diane Franklin, from Bill and Ted, she was also in Better Off Dead with Yuji and John Cusack. So I had that under my belt. I go, why not reach out to some of these actors? And I started a little high. I started out with like Ralph and Billy, Sholo, and slowly but surely, I was starting to be able to get some of the interviews. My very first one was Joe Suh, who you guys recently had, at least at the time of this recording. And then my second one was Hannah Keppel. And then I had Annalisa Cochran, and then Gianni DiCenzo, Nicole Brown. So slowly but surely, everyone started saying yes, to come on the show. And at some point, I decided to start Cobra Kai Companion and have it become its own thing. And I decided to call it Companion because I wanted to be the companion piece to the show. So if you're a fan of the show and you love podcasts, I wanted to be your source for the news and the information and the behind the scenes stories and stories from the actors themselves. And fast forward to 2019 when we were given a tour of the set by Hayden Schlossberg. It was then we learned that they discovered us with our our second interview with Hannah Keppel. It's like, who are these guys? Like, they're interviewing the cast, and they enjoyed it because they were learning so much about some of the cast members that they knew very little about because they've spent maybe a day with them on set or something like that. I always think about the Vas Sanchez interview, who plays Nestor, the convenience store clerk. They from that interview, they learned that he was a stand-up comedian. So the people part of the show was even listening to us, and that's kind of where it all started.
Wow. Were you, amazing. Obviously we don't have Pat Morita around anymore, and it sounds like he was your favorite character from the original Karate Kid trilogy. What was it hard for you to watch Cobra Kai knowing he wasn't going to be in it? Did you feel the same?
Oh.
Yeah. Can you go into that?
Sure. No, I think what John, Josh, and Hayden and all of the writers, whom we've had many of them on the show as well, they do a really great job at keeping the spirit of Miyagi alive. And I think the fandom in itself are big fans of his character. And so just having other people kind of also loving and respecting that character, like it continue his spirit also lives on amongst the fandom. So I never really felt like there was a void or anything like that. And then to see legacy characters like appear on the show as well, that has also been very welcomed. But no, there's actually this is a bit of a tease. I won't reveal who, but I've been playing the long and patient game on getting somebody on the podcast that may be very, very close to Pat that I hope to interview here in the next month or so. So yeah, no, I also created my very first character analysis, which is something I'm not used to. Matter of fact, I haven't done anything creative in writing since like high school, and I'm 20 some odd years removed now. But I did a character study on the character of Mr. Miyagi, and I took a look deep inside kind of his military service, which we know so little about. And we were given some things from the very first movie, including him wearing his blouse with the awards and the medals and things like that. So in my video, I reached out to someone that I had served with, Sergeant First Class Sanderson, who has since retired, and I asked him to do a little bit of research on all these medals that we were able to dig up that, as far as we know, Miyagi earned. And then we spent, we had a conversation about what would it had taken for somebody to earn such medals and awards. And so we went off of that, and people found it very informative, and they're like, I never even thought about that. So we did a little bit of a deep dive, and I reached out to Robert Kamen, and I was just like, hey, anything else you can give us about his background? And he's like, well, that's pretty much it. Everything you guys learned from the film is kind of all the background that he had. So and so that was kind of like a new thing too, because he's not on the show. I just thought that like, well, maybe I can make a little something. And that video I released for Veterans Day of last year.
Wow.
Now,
You
did
did- go
you?
ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, good.
Did you go to the event last Thursday? The Netflix event. Netflix is a joke.
That one I did not attend, and the reason I did not attend was because the previous month I had gone to the Paley Fest, where I was able to cover the red carpet. I was approved for media credentials, so that's kind of the thing. Like, we've been very fortunate. Like, season 4 was the first season we were given screeners for, so I was able to do a non-spoiler review leading up to its release, and then came the media credentials to work the red carpet. So there I got to interview, Peyton, Tanner, and Mary, whom would have been at the time at least was very difficult to schedule because of their busy schedule themselves. But and I live in Portland, Oregon, as you guys know, and so asking my wife to go to Paley was one thing, but to ask her for another event a month later, I thought that might be a much more difficult ask, having 5 kids and
Five
working a
kids.
full-time job. So
Wow,
You're
5
breeding
kids.
your own martial arts army over there.
starting 5, yes, but yeah, enough to start a dojo. I do have 5, and the middle child, who is 9, he just started Taekwondo a few months ago and has been really enjoying it. Who's also a fan of Cobra Kai.
Out of all of the teachers, aka senseis, that are on Cobra Kai, who do you find you listen to the most?
Listen to the most, gosh, this is difficult because like for most of my life, I've always kind of identified myself as Miyagi-Do. I don't know about the podcast listeners, but you guys,
Don't
for
look at
those that are
that.
watching on screen, I have a Miyagi Lotus tattoo on my arm. But with the show Cobra Kai, like I really like Johnny's teachings, and what we learned from season 4. Like, why not learn everyone's styles? Like Sam wanted to learn both styles. Why couldn't we do that? So I kind of like that. Like, you want to be. I've never taken martial arts for one, but I feel like you want to learn all the styles, right? Especially if it's for defense. You want to be able to defend yourself from all types of attacks and enemies and things like that. So one thing in the military that always stuck with me is the phrase "adjust fire." So just kind of be prepared for anything. So I feel Johnny's well, I don't want to call it Johnny's approach, but because he's starting to learn Miyagi-Do, but just the idea of being able to learn all of the styles, I think it kind of fits the best. But yeah, sometimes I kind of disagree with Daniel, and I'm like Sam, I'm like, you know, I think Johnny makes more sense than you, Dad, kind of thing. So I would say Johnny.
I wanted to talk about, you flew yourself out to, by the way, I'm Cobra Kai to the end, but, I understand that as well about the taking pieces from each one, which is natural and great. Then you get a piece of all the different dojos. I was going to say, you flew yourself out to the Paley Fest. One, you got the press credentials, which is amazing achievement on its own to be able to do that. I mean, you're there with everybody. And, what is it about the fandom of this show that gets people so excited? I mean, when we were at the Netflix as a Joke event, Cobra Kai Live, I sat in the very back, kind of, I wanted to just take everything in and see everything, from a bird's eye view. And it was amazing. I mean, it was like going to a Marvel premiere. It was like going to a convention of just amazing fans. And my dad and I were always trying to figure out like what it is about Cobra Kai and Karate Kid that creates this excitement within everybody, even within yourself.
I think what it is it's the formula of the Karate Kid. I feel everybody has, either been discriminated against or been bullied. Jesse, you and Rachel have both shared, stories of being bullied. I remember the bicycle moment where Rachel, I believe you put your bicycle in between you and somebody or something, and then Jesse was there to kind of help. Like the characters from the show, a lot of them, very much of them are so relatable. Like Miguel, I relate to that character so much, Yeah, I think that's what it is. And I feel for those that never really took martial arts, they see what these kids can do. They see somebody like Bert, right, played by Owen Morgan. They see someone like him that can kick some butt. And I feel it's a little bit of like a kind of a bit of a fantasy being able to be that badass and kind of live in this world of Cobra Kai where it's so grounded, just with karate added. I think there's some fun into that. And so I think that's what it is. Like we're finding so many characters that we can just relate to.
It's true. I mean, I relate to so many as well. I mean, I remember. It's funny. Do you remember the first time you saw Bert in season? Was it season 2?
Season 1. He had his. First line,
John Kreese saw Bert. I mean, for the first time.
Yes.
Season 2. I think what was he wearing? A shirt, right? That said something funny.
Yeah, I was coming in. It was episode 2, episode 3, and I couldn't believe that. I can't remember
your version of what you thought, and today the changes.
Yeah, it was something so passive that John Kreese thought of it. It was so passive and forgiving that I can't remember the words on the shirt.
It said something like,
it's a yellow shirt. I remember it, and I stopped and I look at it and I say, as if, what is he doing in this class?
You said, Jesus.
It was like, it was like, save yourself for kindness. It was something like that. And it was just really funny because the audience didn't get a chance to see it as I did, staring at it and digesting it. And what kind of students does he have in his class? I
remember Johnny comes in, and he sees you staring at him. He wants to almost impress you a little bit, and then he's like, everybody, okay, quiet, and line up. And it was like, kind of a half-assed situation. But I mean, although there's so many of those moments that you can rewatch. I mean, we've gone back and watched so many episodes on our own, and we kind of like, oh my God, like this is such a great episode, and this happened, and it's like you really can go back and watch these episodes again and again and again. I guess I don't know. Maybe I'm answering my own question. That's one of the reasons that it is so exciting for fans because it's so much fun to watch, and you get lost in that whole world that you said is relatable to everybody.
So obviously you're more of the Miyagi-Do fan than Cobra Kai. It sounds like the styles really, you appreciate the styles of what Johnny's teaching, the merger of both Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do and creating Eagle Fang, which is somewhat bizarre for me. But
I think it's still bizarre for many.
Yeah. So it's interesting that, how do you feel about the villainy in the shows you've seen all the way through season 4? How do you feel about the antagonists?
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, there's some points that I agree with them as well. And again, it goes all back to the writing. I remember during my season one coverage, I feel it was about mid-season, and it's on that recording, on that review where I stopped at one moment. I go, this the writing is so good. This is like Breaking Bad level, and Breaking Bad's one of my all-time favorite shows because of the writing. The callbacks are great. The setups are fantastic. No stone is left unturned, and that's what you're getting with Cobra Kai. They introduce you something. If they don't answer it immediately, you're gonna get that answer, even if it's 2, 3 seasons down the line. So I think that's what's incredible about it, and they make even if you can't relate to the bad guys, you at least understand their motives. Marty, one of the things that you shared really early on is just like, he's a little bit of good, a little bit of bad. And so you could kind of understand that motives. Even Terry Silver to a certain extent, with season four, like you kind of understand where they're coming from. But with Cobra Kai, and obviously Johnny has a little bit of, well, has a lot of that because that's kind of where he started. But you know, I don't see why we can't use discipline. I feel a lot of people need discipline. So I do appreciate the Cobra Kai aspect of that and coming from the military. So I really liked all the flashbacks in season three and kind of seeing where Twig and young John, was coming from and Captain Turner too. So yeah.
Captain Turner. You remember all the names. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Captain Turner, yes.
What-
Captain Turner.
What episode has left you the most impacted?
That's really a tough one because it you could really take something from every single episode, but I think for me because again like Miyagi, Mr. Miyagi was such a big deal in my life. I think I'd have to probably pick episode 304, which I'm kind of blanking on the title. I mean, it might be The Right Path. I feel if 305 was, oh gosh, yeah, maybe 305 was Miyagi Do. But anyway, it's where Tamlyn Tomita makes her return as the character Kumiko and reads the letters of Mr. Miyagi, and to Daniel, and it's so sad. I feel just about the entire world was crying when we were hearing his words again because how do you bring back that character? You can't. Pat Morita has passed, and it's not the big three's style to recast, right? Like they will make every attempt to bring back the original actors to play the legacy characters. So Michael Jonathan Smith, who wrote that episode, he talked about writing those letters and kind of being kind of adding some answers to those letters to help Daniel, find the right path and find the balance again. So I think that episode is uh, probably the most impactful for me.
It's an amazing. It's like encyclopedia of the. It's like it's like sitting here talking with him about it. It's like you have more knowledge than he does about the show.
You are like with Cobra Kai what I'm like with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I knew every single episode, every single line. I had every memorabilia, and it meant so much to me. It greatly affected who I am as a person.
Yeah, yeah. I think we probably all have something like that. Before Cobra Kai came along, I think the show for me was Quantum Leap. For those that really know me, Dr. Sam Beckett, played by Scott Bakula. I love that show because again, growing up in the 80s and 90s, TV, television, and movies were my babysitter, and Dr. Sam Beckett was so wholesome. Every episode, he's leaping into a new life to right what once went wrong. And so I felt like I was always a good judge of, the wrong and the right and trying to stay out of trouble and things like that. And that's kind of like my approach with the fandom. Like, yeah, I've been around for a long time. I'm one of the older content creators as well. We have a lot of, guys in their teens, early 20s, mid 20s, and things like that. There's a few of us, upwards of 30. I won't reveal my age. You guys can probably do the math from the things that I've said. But I've always kind of like taken this approach to kind of like set a good example. And I think that might be like, coming from like the Mr. Miyagi and me or something like that, right? I remember a few years back, my son and I, we became Twitter famous for a week over just something I said, that was kind of fatherly. My son had taken a picture of me at the or he found a picture of me at the age of 14, and I had these really baggy clothes, and I looked like I got into a lot of trouble. I may or may have not. I'm not going to reveal that, but he took a picture of him when he was 14, looking, he had braces on, and he was just like, and he took the two pictures and tweeted it, and he's just like, oh my God, look at my dad and me, that kind of thing. And at some point, I said, like, I can't believe you shared this, but um, and he said something. I kind of forgot what it was, but my response to him was, I didn't have good role models growing up, and it was important to me that you did, and so I always tried to be like a good role model to him, and that literally caught fire. It went viral. That very evening, my half sister in Texas, she found that tweet. She's like, "Oh my God, like you're on Twitter?" And my son's cousin on his mom's side that lives up in northern Washington, he's like, "Hey, Unc, like you're on Twitter?" Like people were finding my tweet that like know me personally. They're like, "Oh my God, I don't know how you guys have gone viral." And there were people from the UK and from Australia that were following me. And but anyway, a lot of people, like, I think those words meant something to them. They're like, "Oh my God, there's good dads that exist or something." And I felt that because so many eyes were on our very thread, I was trying to like give good advice and try to be a good example and saying like, look, just because if even if you have an absent father, that doesn't mean that you should like do bad things or whatnot. Ultimately it's up to you to make these good decisions and bad decisions.
Well, it's interesting. I was talking to someone the other day, and there was a statistic, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but if I'm quoting this wrong, it said that 85% of fathers walk out on their children by the time that they're 5 years old. And you see in the show Cobra Kai, there is that in the show. Daniel didn't have a father, and Johnny didn't have a father. So these teachers become father-like paternal role models for them.
Right.
And I think that's why this show does so well is we're all looking for teachers. We're all looking for role models. We're all looking for someone to guide us. And I think what's very unique about this show is, which we were talking to the writers about and the creators about, is each episode has this symbolic lesson that you can learn something about. I remember watching season 4 and I remember like writing in my journal, like it was something that Daniel said to Samantha. I remember exactly what it was, but it was like, oh, that's a life lesson. That's a philosophy that I could take with me for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. The creators, they're fans of those movies as well. Like we all know it. They weren't like, oh, kicking around, like sitting in a room wondering what could be the next thing for them just to make money. They love those movies, and so they want to do right by it. There was something that, and again, I wasn't at this event, but from what I've heard from other people, I believe it was Josh who said something like, if it wasn't us up here, doing this for you guys, we would be in the audience with you guys watching somebody else do it. So like for them to take this show and write these stories and write these philosophies, like, they're doing their due diligence and making like a really good product. It's not just to throw something up there for comedies and stuff like that. They're giving layers to these characters, and I think that's played as I remember correctly from interviews. Like that's kind of what Ralph and Billy said. Why they decided to do this? Because of those extra layers. Marty, like I feel you came back for the same reasons, right? You wanted to be a little bit of good, a little bit of bad. And so, like, if we didn't have those different sides of these characters, I feel the legacy actors, they wouldn't have returned. So, yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of philosophies and things that we can learn from it. So, yeah, Rachel, I think you nailed it right there on the head as to why, like, a lot of people do enjoy watching these shows.
Go ahead, Dad.
The most important thing I think the writer said to us, I'm sure you've seen that podcast that we did with John, Josh, and Hayden. I think the most important thing that resonates for me is they ask, which is why Cobra Kai is so popular, I believe, in the writing aspect. They ask themselves why in every character. Why is this character doing that? Why? And they were asking why from the very beginning. And that's what they talked about. That was their I guess, their form of research first, was deciding, why would John Kreese do this? Why would Ralph do this? Why would Billy do this? And that's fascinating. I learned so much as an actor, because I always ask why and create backstories and why I'm ever doing anything. But to try and write for me, to write a Western, to write my dream and all that, always ask why every character does everything. It's fascinating. It's just really fascinating, which I think truly allows us to understand why the success of this show is so vast. It's something for everyone. But once you get into what's there for you, you get a question answered. Why the character is doing this? And you can come away with so much life information from that. Most shows you can't. Most shows are all fluff.
No, absolutely. I kind of think back to my senior year. We went on a class trip to a play, and afterwards we were able to stay there and kind of ask the crew, the cast and crew, questions. And I forgot the question and I remember the answer. I forgot the question, but the answer was like, oh, because we thought it would be cool. And afterwards, we went back to class. And my teacher brought that up. It's like he was very underwhelmed and kind of disappointed in that answer, and that kind of stuck with me. So I've always kind of watched movies and television with that thought, like, why would you do that? What is your motive here? So that's why I love the writing from Breaking Bad, and then ultimately with Cobra Kai. Marty, you said the writers, they're always thinking about the motives. Why would this character do that? And not often do I hear somebody in the fandom question the motives of certain characters. I feel we see something, and with the writing, we understand that. Whether we disagree or agree with the character, that's a different story. But at least we understand where these characters are coming from.
I love that you keep bringing up Breaking Bad. For me, I've binge watched Breaking Bad, I think 4 times. To me, I don't really, other than, I know we're talking about Cobra Kai, but it's a genius show. And I think you're right. There is similar writing. There is that dynamic between, Aaron Paul and Bryan Cranston on the show, where it's kind of like the similar dynamic with Billy and my dad. It's this bond. It's this chemistry. It's this friendship, but also I hate you, but I love you. And that's life, right? It's like,
it is.
It's not black and white. There's so many layers, and even like with Tanner's character. And I loved in the episode, and I was curious what you thought about this, because I haven't seen it done many times in film or television, where you see a bully feel remorse for his behavior, and where you see him I think was it the end of season 4, and he comes to Johnny and he cries because he tapped into that bully that he never wanted to become. And I thought, holy shit, because I work in mental health and I see the impact of shows in the world, this gives people the opportunity to say, hey, I can regret something I've done. I can feel bad for something I did, and I can go to someone and ask for help. And I can say, what happened? I don't know. Like, tell me what I did wrong, and I feel bad, and he's crying, and it's so important for people to see that.
Absolutely. And that was actually one of the questions I asked. Oh, gosh. Well, at Paley Fest, I asked Tanner something, and he talked about that very moment. It might have been like, oh, what was your favorite moment in season 4? Because we hadn't seen Robbie do that much in one season. Like in season 2, he was Miyagi-Do. Season 3, he's like, it's gosh, I'm kind of blanking on everything because like everything just runs together. But obviously, season 4. That was the big surprise when we saw like an early trailer. Like, wait a minute now, Robbie is not only with Cobra Kai, but he's teaching like Miyagi, lessons and training. Like, what is going on? But I thought Tanner has grown so much from the previous seasons, and we see that he's done other projects on the side as well. And I mentioned in my non-spoiler season 4 review, like I feel that only can add to everyone's experiences working with other directors in other with other projects. So I think whatever Tanner brought in season 4, it really brought a lot of attention to me, at least, and Tanner was for me. And Robbie's moment, and he's just I'm forgetting the dialogue, but basically, yeah, he's telling his dad that like he's kind of like just tired of hating him all the time and all of that, and so they're both kind of forgiving one another. Um, I'm sorry, Rachel. What was the question there? I
No,
was trying to give context.
you answered. I actually wanted to ask you this before we wrap up soon. I wanted to know a couple things. They released a season 5 teaser at the Cobra Kai Live event, which was awesome. So I want to know what you thought about that, and I also want to hear. I first want to hear where. Obviously, we can't say anything, but I want to know where do you think John Kreese is going, and where do you think things are happening on your own, and then based on the teaser.
Right. So you want me to obviously like I have no insight to anything, so you're okay with just kind of giving my thoughts, right?
Yeah, this is all fan theory. Yeah.
Right. It is fan theory. And recently I kind of dropped my big fan theory for season 5 on our breakdown, which we spent a little over 2 hours on, and Ken Cole's show, which they spent 3 hours. I was on there for about an hour and a half. But John Kreese, they don't show us him right now. I feel like we may get a glimpse of where he is with the next trailer. Everything that we are hearing, I asked, the big three at Paley Fest as well, like, even Ralph and Billy, like, give me a word that describes season 5, and they gave me like all these great words, but every season has delivered thus far. Every season continues to get bigger and better, and I'm always wondering, like, what are you gonna do to make this season any different, and bigger and better and all these things, right? So what we see with the season 5 trailer, we see Chosen, and we see that line, and I am gasoline, that he says to Terry Silver. Season 4, I was like, oh my God, like, we haven't seen Thomasine Griffith in so long, and for him to dust off the gi and come back and play this character, we're like, oh my God, see, so like he was capable of so much more. We just wish that there were more projects for him leading up to that. So for everyone to be exposed to, for many of them, was probably the first time seeing him in a role like that, or at all, even for the younger audience. It was very much welcome. It's just like, oh wow, yeah, give me all the Terry Silvers. And then with the season 5 trailer, with Chosen's one line, it almost undercuts, like, hey, this is Chosen and Terry Silver in the same frame, you guys. Like, that kind of just went over my head by that badass line. And so I sat there and I thought about it. I go, what is going to happen? There was something I thought about, like, prior to season 3, because with season 3, that's when we got the reveal that Chosen was coming back on the show. And I'm just like, okay, the character of Chosen, what do we remember of him from the Karate Kid Part 2? Well, he threw the word honor around a lot, like so much so I even questioned, like, Chosen, do you know what honor means? Like, I'm not sure if you do, buddy. And so, like, I feel, okay, what could possibly happen that is flipping the script that the big three likes to use? What could be so different? Could someone possibly die? And that has been brought up a lot, within the fandom, and I think it's very easy to be like, oh, Kreese, Terry Silver, and things like that. To me, and Chosen's actually one of my favorite characters too. I'm like, what if Chosen dies? What if Chosen dies defending Daniel, and he dies honorably that way? Because in season 3, we learned that he has no wife or kids, which is kind of an easy, writing to write off a character. But how do you make it impactful to the fans? How do you hurt the fans? How does it, how do you make it a big deal? Giving him a badass line like, and I am gasoline. Because we also saw a glimpse of Terry Silver saying, like, I told you not to play with fire, and so so what is it? Does Daniel go off the deep end and goes to kind of goes outside his boundaries and gets Chosen killed? And so who else does he have there to help him? The enemy of my enemy is my ally, John Kreese, sitting in jail. Daniel doesn't want to do it, but maybe he does reach out and asks the one man that just got burned by Terry Silver to help, take him down. So it's a lot, I mean, I'm not a writer, obviously, but I love the show and the movie's enough.
Kreese is in Tahiti and getting massages.
He's getting massaged by was it Mona or something like that? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, actually, I think we did joke something like that prior to that trailer coming out. That's where he is.
I love it.
Interesting.
I love it.
Interesting.
Well, Peter, we're just so happy to have you on here, and the fandom continues, and I love your theories. I think it's great, and obviously there's so much in store. I mean, Dad, if you had to describe season 5, in one word, what would it be?
Mayhem. Mayhem.
I love it. That's the first.
That's going out.
He's
He's taking that and he's sending it to the internet.
That's right.
There you go.
Yeah.
Peter, it's been so lovely to talk to you, and I'm so you have 5 children. My hat is off to you. You're my hero. That's beautiful.
You truly are. You are the hero.
Yeah, you truly
We just
are.
play heroes on
Yes.
TV.
All right. That's very kind of you guys to say. And again, thank you so much for having me on. We said this off mic, but I wanted to put it out there. This has come full circle. Martin Kove has been on my podcast, and now I'm on his. Like this is amazing. This is a dream come true right here.
Aw.
Well, you have your own dojo then. 5 kids, Just invite me. I'll speak at your dojo when you get 10.
Yeah.
Love it. I love it.
All right,
Yeah. When I need some more discipline, I'll definitely reach out.
All
Whatever
right,
you
good.
need, we're here for you, man. You
Keep
got our
drinking the
support.
blood there, Peter.
It's funny. We had Sean Kanan on before, whatever it was last week's episode or whatever it was, and I was like, dude, you look. He was talking about his 50th birthday. I was like, Sean, you look amazing. He's like, well, I drink Miyagi-Do blood.
Yeah, I can see that. I'll throw it out there. I'm 39, and people are like, "Oh my God, I thought you were like 26." And I'm trying to do what Ralph does. I don't get it. That man looks younger than he did in season 1.
There is a Karate Kid secret of something. I can't tell you what it is. Maybe I'll tell you in season 12 of Cobra Kai. Anyway,
That'd be great.
thank you, Peter, so
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate everybody listening to Kicking It with the Coves. I'm Jesse Cove. Got my dad, my sister, and give us a like and a follow on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast. Please give us a follow. Also, write us a 5-star review if you enjoy it. I think you guys do because that's all I keep hearing. So take care, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Take care of yourself, Peter.
All right, you all too.
Bye.
Bye.